When you let go of what weighs you down, you make space for what lifts you up. Let that one breathe for a second, my friends, because this message today, it's not just advice. It's a lifeline for anyone who's been caught in the emotional tug-of-war, waiting for someone else to validate their worth. See, here's the truth they don't tell you. They don't miss you when you love them more. They don't miss you when you overgive, overthink, and overstay. No, they miss you the moment you stop needing them. That's the twist, the plot change, the shift that nobody warns you about. And today, I'm breaking it all down, step by step, the Stoic way, with clarity, calm, and a little tough love. Before we dive deep, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and stay with me because this journey isn't just about them missing you, it's about you remembering who you are. Now, picture this with me for a moment, folks. Imagine you're holding onto a helium balloon. It's beautiful, colorful, full of life. But the harder you grip the string, the more you pull it down, the less it floats. You're weighing down the very thing you're trying to hold on to. That's what neediness does. It suffocates, it smothers, it turns love into pressure. But the moment you loosen your grip, the moment you let it rise on its own, that's when it starts to float freely again. And you're no longer the one holding it back. See, they don't miss the version of you that's always available, always reaching, always proving. They don't feel the absence of what never left. But take a step back, let go, let your energy rise. Suddenly, you become the breath of fresh air they didn't realize they needed, and that's when it hits them. We've been sold a lie, my friends. The lie that the more you give, the more they'll love you. That if you pour your heart out, if you're always there, always ready somehow, they'll appreciate you more. But the truth, people don't value what they don't have to earn. They don't miss the ground beneath their feet until the earthquake comes. They don't miss the sunlight until the clouds roll in. And they don't miss your presence until it becomes a memory. That's the power of detachment. That's the power of reclaiming your space. And listen, I get it. It's scary to pull back, to stop reaching out. It feels like you're risking everything. But here's another truth bomb for you. You're not risking love, you're risking your peace by holding on too tight. And what the Stoics knew, what Marcus Aurelius wrote, is this: the best revenge is to be unlike your enemy. That means you don't respond to emotional chaos with more chaos. You don't meet distance with desperation. You meet it with stillness, with strength, with the calm that says, I am whole, with or without you. Now, don't get me wrong, we're not here to play games. This isn't about making them chase or manipulating feelings. It's about standing in your truth so firmly, so unshakably, that they can't help but notice your absence. Your silence speaks volumes. Your distance creates space for them to feel what they never had to feel before. The reality of life without your energy feeding their ego. And that, my friends, that's the moment they start to miss you. Not when you chase, not when you beg, but when you've let go. So stick with me, because we're about to dive into why this happens, how it happens, and how you, yes, you, can become the kind of person who doesn't just get missed, but gets remembered. The kind of person whose absence commands respect. If you're ready to reclaim your power, type this in the comments: I let go. Let the world know you're done with chasing. You're done with overgiving. And if this message is already hitting home, drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and stay with me, because this is only the beginning. Your journey to freedom and self-respect starts now. Number 1, needing them gives away your power. No person is free who is not master of themselves. That's from Epictetus, and I want you to sit with that for a second. Really let it sink into your bones, because this right here, this is where most people lose themselves. The moment you need someone to feel whole, to feel enough, to feel validated, you've handed over the keys to your peace. You've made them the landlord of your emotional home. And when they decide to lock the door, you're left outside, shivering in the cold, wondering how you got there. But the truth is, you handed them the keys. Now imagine this. You're standing in the middle of a vast ocean, clinging to a life raft that's barely holding together. It's leaking, it's wobbling, but you hold on tighter. The fear in your heart says, if I let go, I'll drown. But here's the plot twist. The shore is right behind you. You're so focused on holding onto that raft, you don't even realize that freedom is one swim away. That raft, that's your neediness. That's the part of you that believes you can't survive without their approval, without their love, without their attention. But my friends, what if I told you the raft is sinking you faster than letting go ever could? I know what's running through your mind right now. But if I stop reaching out, they'll forget me. If I stop giving, they'll move on. If I don't prove I care, they'll think I never did. These are the lies that fear whispers in your ear. These are the chains that keep you stuck in a loop, giving more, proving more, losing more of yourself with every effort. And yet, the more you give, the more invisible you become. The harder you hold on, the less they feel your presence. Because here's the brutal truth. People don't value what's always there. They don't feel the weight of what's too easy to carry. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That includes how much space you give someone in your thoughts, in your emotions, in your life. When you make them the center of your world, you shrink yourself down. You dim your own light so theirs can shine brighter. You believe that by pouring into them, eventually they'll pour back. But most of the time, they get used to the flow. They expect it. They never have to feel the weight of your absence because you never leave. But here's the shift. Here's where you reclaim your power. The moment you stop needing them, the moment you decide your worth isn't up for negotiation, everything changes. And I know, it feels impossible. You've wired yourself to believe they're the source of your happiness. But what if you rewired that? What if you became the source of your peace? What if your value was never tied to their response? That's when the fear starts to dissolve. That's when you stop begging for crumbs and start feasting at your own table. It won't be easy. I won't lie to you. The first few days you pull back, your mind will scream. Check your phone. Send that message. Just one more reach out. Because fear hates silence. It hates the unknown. But silence is where you grow. It's where they start to notice. Not because you played a game, but because you remembered who you are. You stop being the person who gives away power. You become the person who owns it. And in that shift, they feel the change. They feel the absence of your energy, your attention, your validation. They notice the space that you used to fill so easily. That's when curiosity creeps in. That's when they start to wonder. But we'll get there. Stay with me. For now, I want you to write it in the comments. I reclaimed my power. Show yourself. Show the world around you that you're done giving away your peace. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and stay with me, because what's coming next? It's about how your absence creates space for them to feel what they've been avoiding. Let's keep going. Number 2. Your absence isn't felt until you create space. The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. That's Marcus Aurelius, and my friends, today we're pulling the curtain back on one of the greatest illusions in relationships, the belief that the more present you are, the more they'll appreciate you. But the truth, they don't feel your absence until you give them a chance to feel it. And that only happens when you create space, real space, not with anger, not with games, but with self-respect. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine walking into a room filled with the scent of a candle burning. At first it's soothing, noticeable, but stay in that room long enough and what happens? You stop smelling it. Your senses dull. The scent that once felt comforting fades into the background. That's what your constant presence becomes. Familiar, predictable, overlooked. Not because you aren't valuable, but because you never gave them the chance to miss what they've always had. And here's where the fear kicks in. I know the questions swirling in your mind right now. But if I step back, won't they just move on? If I don't reach out, won't they forget me? These fears, they're normal. They're the product of conditioning that taught you love equals constant giving. But the reality, love thrives in space. Desire breathes in distance. You don't crave what's always in front of you. You crave what's just out of reach. That's not manipulation. It's human nature. Seneca once said, "Nothing is more honorable than a grateful heart." But here's the hard truth. They can't be grateful for something they never had to earn. They can't appreciate what's always there because it becomes invisible. Your texts, your calls, your reassurances, they become background noise, white noise, a song on repeat that they stop hearing, and so you give more, louder, trying to be noticed. But the more you give, the more they tune out. You've been tricked into believing that if you don't remind them of your worth, they'll forget it. But the opposite is true. When you pull back, when you create space, that's when they start to feel your absence. It's not the presence that creates desire. It's the contrast, the missing, the wondering, the space where their thoughts can roam without your constant reassurance. But let's be honest, it's terrifying to create that space, isn't it? It feels like stepping into the unknown, like walking a tightrope without a net. Your mind screams at you to check your phone, to send that one more message. Just one. Just to remind them. Because if you don't, what if they move on? But let me flip the script. What if they move closer? What if the very space you're afraid to create is the space where desire grows? Where appreciation lives? Where they finally feel the weight of what they've taken for granted? Here's the lie we're breaking today. Presence alone doesn't equal value. The lie is that if you're always there, they'll love you more. But love isn't born from constant contact. Love is born from freedom, from choice, from absence that makes the heart realize what it misses. When you pull back, not out of spite, but out of self-respect, you give them the opportunity to choose you, to miss you, to feel the gap that your presence used to fill. I want you to imagine it like this. You've been standing at their door, knocking day after day, and they've grown used to the sound. It's background noise now. But the day you stop knocking, that silence, it's deafening. They start to wonder, start to notice. Why aren't they reaching out? Did I lose them? That wondering is where curiosity is born, and curiosity, that's the birthplace of desire. But here's the thing, it's not about making them miss you. It's about creating space for your own growth, for your own peace, because when you're always present for them, you're often absent for yourself. You lose yourself in the giving. You forget your own needs, your own path, your own worth. And pulling back, that's how you find yourself again. So if you're ready to stop being background noise, to stop being the song they take for granted, I want you to write this in the comments. I created space. Let the world know that you're stepping back, not to play games, but to reclaim your power. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and stay with me, because up next, we're talking about how silence becomes your loudest statement. And trust me, you won't want to miss this. Number 3, silence speaks louder when you've reclaimed yourself. The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself. That's exactly where this journey is leading us, to a place where your silence speaks louder than all the words you've ever said. But here's the catch: it only speaks when it comes from reclaimed power, from self-respect, from that deep well inside where you no longer need to explain yourself, to prove yourself, to be heard just for the sake of validation. Because when you've truly reclaimed yourself, silence stops being passive. It becomes presence. Let's dive into this with a little imagery, shall we? Picture a still lake at dawn. The water is smooth as glass, reflecting the sky perfectly. There's no disturbance, no ripples. Now imagine tossing a stone into that lake. The ripples spread wide, disrupting that calm. But without the stone, the lake reflects everything clearly. That lake, that's your mind, your energy when you've reclaimed yourself. Calm, centered, unbothered. And here's the twist. People notice still water more than chaos. They sense the difference. They feel the calm. Your silence becomes the mirror, reflecting back to them what they've lost. And that reflection, it's impossible to ignore. But I know what your heart is whispering. If I stay silent, will they forget me? Won't they think I don't care? It's the fear of being erased, of being irrelevant. But that fear, that's exactly what keeps you trapped in a cycle of over-explaining, over-giving, overreaching. And every time you break the silence just to prove you care, you drown out your own power. Because the truth is, words lose their weight when they're spoken too often. Silence? Silence builds tension. It builds mystery. It makes them lean in. You've been taught that silence equals distance, that if you're quiet, you're losing them. But the opposite is true when you reclaim yourself. Silence becomes a gravitational force. It draws attention, not because you're playing games, but because you're no longer handing your energy away for free. You've taken your power back. You've stopped chasing, stopped proving. And now they feel that shift in their bones. They feel the absence of your voice, your reassurance, your constant presence. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one." And the same applies here. Waste no more time trying to convince them of your worth. Be it, live it. Let your stillness, your absence, your silence do the speaking. Because that's when they start to ask the questions. Why aren't they reaching out? Have they really moved on? Did I lose them for good? And those questions, they echo in the spaces where your words used to be. They linger in the silence you've left behind. But here's the key, my friends. Silence only speaks when you're grounded in it. When it's not a tactic, but a truth. When you're not waiting on the edge of your seat, checking your phone, hoping for a reaction. No, you're living your life. You're focused on your growth, your peace, your purpose. You've reclaimed yourself so fully that your silence becomes a reflection of your inner strength. Think about it like this. You were once like a candle burning at both ends, giving light, giving warmth, but burning yourself out in the process. Now, you're like the sun, steady, constant, radiant, without needing to explain your light. And the sun doesn't chase anyone. It rises, it shines, and the world adjusts. So if you're ready to let your silence speak, if you're done with chasing, done with proving, I want you to write it in the comments. My silence speaks. Let the world know that you've reclaimed yourself, that you've found your center. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and stay with me. Because next, we're stepping into how self-respect instantly shifts the dynamic. And trust me, that's where the real power kicks in. Number 4, self-respect shifts the dynamic instantly. If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. That's Marcus Aurelius laying it down plain and simple. And my friends, that applies not just to how you treat others, but how you treat yourself. See, self-respect isn't just a nice idea. It's a force, a quiet power that shifts everything the moment you decide that your peace isn't up for negotiation anymore. And once you make that decision, when you draw that line, you stop bending, begging, or breaking for anyone who can't meet you there. The energy changes, the dynamic flips. You're no longer the one chasing. You become the one being noticed. Let me bring this home with a metaphor. Imagine standing in front of a mirror that's cracked. Every time you look into it, the reflection's distorted. So you adjust yourself, tilt your head, change the angle, trying to see yourself clearly. But the problem isn't you, it's the mirror. That cracked mirror? That's what seeking validation from someone else looks like. You twist yourself, reshape yourself, try to fit their version of what's enough. You dim your light, you stay silent when you should speak up, you shrink your truth just to make someone else comfortable. But no matter how much you adjust, the reflection is still broken because the mirror isn't whole. Now here's the shift. When you choose self-respect, you stop adjusting to fit a broken reflection. You find a new mirror, one that reflects you as you are, clear, whole, undistorted. And that's what self-respect does. It realigns your energy. You no longer compromise your truth just to stay close. You stop trading integrity for affection. And that, my friends, that's when they feel it. Because suddenly, the person who would have bent over backwards to stay is standing tall, no longer willing to shrink. I know what you're thinking. But if I stop bending, won't they leave? If I don't give a little, won't I lose them altogether? And here's the hard truth. You might. But ask yourself this. What do you really lose if you let go of someone who only values you when you shrink? What's the real cost of holding on to someone who needs you to be less so they can feel like more? The lie we've been sold is that compromise equals love, that if you're easygoing, if you let things slide, if you keep the peace, that's what makes a relationship work. But there's a difference between healthy compromise and self-betrayal. When you silence your needs, ignore your boundaries, dim your light just to keep someone around, you're not compromising, you're abandoning yourself. And here's what happens when you stop doing that. When you choose self-respect over approval, they notice. They notice not because you yelled, not because you made a scene, but because your energy shifted. You're no longer chasing, you're no longer performing. You're standing in your truth, calmly, firmly, and they can feel it. The space where you used to explain yourself, justify yourself, make excuses for their behavior, it's gone. Replaced by stillness, by clarity, by self-respect. Seneca said, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." And the same applies to your emotional energy. When you give it away too freely, when you're always available, always adjusting, you lose your center. But self-respect gathers your energy back. It focuses it. It says, "I am here. This is where I stand." And that's magnetic, Because here's the thing, people are drawn to certainty. They're drawn to the person who knows who they are, who doesn't need to prove their worth, who stands firm even when the ground shakes. So if you're ready to let self-respect shift the dynamic, to stop explaining, stop adjusting, stop shrinking, I want you to write it in the comments. I choose self-respect. Let the world know you're done compromising who you are for someone else's comfort. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and stay with me, because coming up next, we're stepping into what happens when you become emotionally unavailable to the inconsistent, and trust me, that's when they really start to feel your absence. Number 5, they notice when you're no longer available emotionally. The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have. That's Epictetus cutting right to the core. And my friends, nothing outside your control holds more power over you than emotional availability given to someone who doesn't deserve it. Here's the truth most won't say out loud. They don't notice you when you're emotionally available 24/7. They only notice the shift when you stop offering your heart on a silver platter. That's when they feel it. That's when the silence echoes. That's when the questions creep in. Picture this. You're standing outside in a storm, holding an umbrella over someone else's head, shielding them, taking the brunt of the rain yourself. Day after day, you hold that umbrella, waiting for them to notice, waiting for them to say, "Thank you," waiting for them to return the gesture. But they never do. Why? Because they've grown comfortable in the shelter you've provided. It's not that they're cruel, it's that they've forgotten what it feels like to stand in the rain. But the day you close that umbrella, the day you stop holding up their emotional shelter, that's the day they feel the rain. And suddenly, they notice. Not because you made a scene, not because you demanded recognition, but because you stopped giving what they never appreciated. And I get it. That shift, it feels like walking a tightrope. You've told yourself over and over that if you just give a little more, love a little harder, they'll finally come around. That being emotionally available, checking in, holding space for them, even when they've given you mixed signals, that's how you'll win their heart. But here's the lie we've been living. Emotional availability doesn't equal emotional connection. And when you give without receiving, you're not building a bond. You're building resentment, quietly, slowly, until one day you wake up and realize you're drained, and they're still distant. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. And that includes your emotional energy. When you offer your emotions freely to someone who's inconsistent, who shows up only when it's convenient, you're handing over that power. You become a faucet they can turn on and off whenever they choose, and the more you allow it, the more they expect it. But the day you stop, the day you decide your emotional availability is earned, not given, that's the day they feel the shift. It's like a fortress with no walls. Anyone can walk in, take what they want, and leave. But build those walls, not to keep love out, but to keep chaos out. And suddenly, not everyone has access. Suddenly, they have to earn their way in. And that fortress, that's your heart. That's your emotional energy. It's not a public park. It's a kingdom, and not everyone deserves an audience with the king or queen. But I know what you're feeling right now. If I close off, won't I lose them? If I stop being emotionally available, won't they think I don't care? Those fears, they're the same ones that kept you holding that umbrella. But ask yourself, what have you really gained by always being available? Has it brought you closer? Or has it made you feel more alone in the connection than you would on your own? Here's the truth. They notice when you stop being emotionally available, but not in the way you fear. They don't feel rejected. They feel the space you've reclaimed, the space where your energy used to fill their gaps. And in that space, they face themselves, their own absence, their own inconsistency. And that's uncomfortable for them. But that's where growth happens, for them and for you. Because when you choose emotional independence, when you say, "I'm not here to be your emotional safety net," you create space for real connection, the kind built on mutual respect, not obligation, the kind where both people bring something to the table. So if you're ready to stop being a faucet, stop being a shelter for someone who only shows up when it's raining, I want you to write this in the comments. I choose emotional independence. Let the world know you're done being emotionally available to inconsistency. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and stay with me, because next we're diving into how curiosity is born in your stillness, and trust me, that's where the real magic starts. Number 6. Curiosity is born in your stillness. He who is silent and smiles is often feared more than he who speaks and laughs. That's an old proverb, my friends, and it speaks volumes about the power of stillness. Because stillness isn't emptiness, it's not passive, it's presence with power. And when you learn to stand in that stillness, calm, unshaken, unmoved, that's when curiosity is born. That's when they start wondering where you went, why you're no longer circling their world, why the energy they once took for granted feels like it's disappeared. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine walking into a room that always had a ticking clock. Every day, every night, that steady tick, tick, tick in the background. After a while, you don't even hear it anymore. It fades into the atmosphere. But the day that clock stops ticking, the silence is deafening. You notice the absence more than you ever noticed the sound. That's what happens when you become still. When you stop reaching, stop explaining, stop chasing. The space you leave behind, it's loud, it's noticeable, and it raises questions they can't silence. But here's what I know is running through your mind. If I'm still, if I say nothing, won't they move on? Won't they assume I don't care? This is where fear tries to drag you back into the cycle of overgiving and over-explaining. Because fear hates silence. Fear wants noise. Fear wants you to fill the gap so they don't have to feel your absence. But silence is where curiosity is born, and curiosity is where desire lives. Seneca said, "If a man knows not which port he sails, no wind is favorable." When you're constantly moving, constantly trying to adjust your sails to fit their winds, you lose your direction. But when you anchor yourself, when you stand still and steady in your truth, that's when the winds start to notice you. That's when they start adjusting to your energy. And in your stillness, they feel the shift. Think about this. When you were always available, always reaching out, always showing up, you removed the space where curiosity could breathe. You suffocated it. You made sure there was no room for wondering, no chance for them to ask, where did they go? But now you've stepped back. You've stopped orbiting their world. And that space you've created, it's not just absence, it's mystery. It's the unknown. And the human mind, it hates the unknown. It craves answers. It seeks closure. But you're no longer giving it to them. You've reclaimed your energy. You've stepped into stillness. And that stillness, it's not cold. It's not cruel. It's clear. It says, I am whole without your attention. It says, I don't need to prove anything. And that's what shakes them. Not the silence itself, but the energy behind it. The certainty. the calm confidence that says, I've stopped seeking, I've started being. But I know it's hard. The temptation to fill the silence, to break the stillness, to send that message, to remind them you're there, it creeps in like a shadow. But let me ask you this, how has filling the silence served you so far? Did it bring them closer, or did it make you feel more distant, more drained? The truth is, you can't force curiosity. It's born in the absence of answers. It's born when they start asking questions you no longer feel the need to answer. Imagine a lighthouse standing tall on the shore. It doesn't chase ships, it doesn't shout, it simply shines. And the ships, they adjust their course toward it. That's you now. You're the lighthouse, standing in stillness, guiding but not chasing, radiating but not proving. And they feel that, even if they don't say it, even if they pretend not to notice. Stillness speaks to the parts of them they can't silence. So if you're ready to let curiosity do the work, to let your stillness speak louder than your words ever could, I want you to write this in the comments. I became still. Show yourself. Show the world around you that you're done chasing, done filling the silence, done orbiting. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and stay with me, because next we're going to explore how your growth becomes the real distance they feel. And trust me, that's when everything starts to shift. Number 7. Growth is the real distance they feel. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. That's Seneca, speaking right to the heart of every fear that's ever told you. If I stop trying, I'll lose them. But here's what fear doesn't tell you. The real shift doesn't happen when you step back physically. It happens when you grow beyond who you used to be. That's the distance they feel. Not the space between messages, but the gap between the old you and the new you. The version of you that once tolerated inconsistency. They could reach that version. But the person you're becoming? That's someone they can't touch unless they rise to meet you. And that, my friends, is where the real power lives. Let me lay this out with a metaphor. Imagine standing at the bottom of a mountain with someone. At first, you're side by side, but over time, you start climbing. Not because you're trying to leave them behind, but because you're called to something higher. They stay at the base, comfortable, watching you ascend. And as you climb, the distance grows. Not because you ran away, but because you rose up. And the view from up there, it changes you. You start to see things differently. You breathe different air. And when they look up and realize they're not standing beside you anymore, that's when they feel the real loss. Not the loss of your presence, but the loss of access to the version of you they once knew. But I know the fear, my friends. The voice that says, if I grow, they'll forget me. If I focus on myself, they'll move on. That fear is a liar. It wants to keep you stuck at the base of the mountain, waiting, hoping, holding back your evolution so you don't lose their attention. But here's the truth. If your growth scares them away, they were never meant to stay. Because the people who belong in your life, they climb with you, or at least they respect the climb. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." The fear that feels like it's blocking your path, that's the path. The resistance you feel about focusing on yourself, about climbing higher, about leaving behind what no longer serves you, that's the very sign that you're on the right track. Because growth is uncomfortable, it stretches you, it pulls you away from familiar patterns, from old versions of yourself, from the dynamics where you gave too much and settled for too little. And here's the beautiful part. Your growth doesn't just change you, It changes the energy between you and them. Suddenly, they're looking for the person who used to respond immediately, who used to explain, who used to chase. But that person, they don't exist anymore. You've outgrown the version of yourself that needed to prove your worth. And in that gap, in that quiet space where your old self used to live, they feel the shift. It's not always immediate. Sometimes they don't realize what's missing right away. But as you keep climbing, as you build new habits, new peace, new strength, they start to sense it. The energy is different. They feel it when you don't respond the same way, when you don't rush to fill the silence, when you're no longer circling their orbit, but building your own world. Think of it like this. You used to be a garden they visited whenever they felt like it. No fences, no boundaries. They could come and go, pick the flowers, enjoy the shade. But now you've built walls. Not to keep people out, but to protect what you've cultivated. And they can't just wander in anymore. They have to knock. They have to earn their place. And that, my friends, that's the distance they feel. So if you're ready to let your growth be the distance they can't cross, I want you to write it in the comments. I chose growth. Show yourself. Show the world around you that you're done shrinking, done waiting, done standing still. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and stay with me. Because next, we're going to uncover how your peace becomes something they have to earn. And trust me, that's when the game really changes. Number 8. Your peace becomes something they have to earn. He who is everywhere is nowhere. Seneca nailed it again, my friends. When your energy is scattered, when you're always available, when anyone can access you at any time, they stop feeling your presence. Your peace becomes diluted. But the moment you start gathering that energy back, when you stop giving out your peace like free samples at a grocery store, that's when your presence becomes priceless. That's when they feel the shift, and that's when they realize access to you is no longer free. It has to be earned. Imagine this. You're a gem sitting out in the open. Anyone passing by can pick you up, examine you, toss you back down. You're exposed, easily handled, easily dismissed. But what happens when that same gem is placed in a vault, behind glass, surrounded by security? Suddenly, it's rare, valuable. People admire it from a distance. They know they can't just walk in and take it. Your peace is that gem. And when you finally decide that not everyone deserves access, the energy changes. They feel it. They can't just waltz back into your life, toss you a breadcrumb, and expect the same open arms. But I know the fear, my friends. The little voice whispering, but if I make them earn it, what if they walk away? What if they never come back? That fear, it's the same thing that's been keeping you too available for far too long. You've confused being accessible with being valuable. But here's the truth. Easy access breeds complacency. People don't value what they can reach without effort. They value what demands respect. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You deserve to be happy. You deserve to live a life you are excited about. Don't let others make you forget that." And that includes protecting your peace. Because peace isn't just something you stumble upon. It's something you build brick by brick. It's the result of choosing yourself day after day, choosing your boundaries, choosing your growth, choosing your energy. And once you've built it, you don't hand it out like candy on Halloween. Think about this. You once had an open door policy, one text, one vague apology, one casual, "Hey, how have you been?" And there you were, ready, willing, open. You dropped everything to meet them where they were, even when they didn't meet you where you needed. And what did it cost you? Your peace, your self-respect, your time. You gave too much for too little, and they learned they could come and go as they pleased. But not anymore. Not today, because now your peace has a price. And that price, respect, consistency, effort. You're no longer that gem sitting out in the open. You've placed yourself in that vault, not because you're hiding, not because you're punishing anyone, but because you've learned your value. And that means not everyone gets access. And when they feel that, when they realize they can't just show up and expect the same open door, that's when the questions start. That's when they feel the absence, not just of your presence, but of your energy, your peace, your certainty. They feel the gap where their inconsistency used to slide right in. And now, there's no room for that anymore. But I get it. The fear is still there, right? If I make them earn it, what if they decide I'm not worth the effort? But let me flip that for you. If they're not willing to earn it, why would you give them access to your peace? Why would you hand over something you've worked so hard to build to someone who can't even meet you halfway? So here's the shift. Your peace is no longer negotiable. It's not up for debate. It's not something you offer to anyone who knocks. It's reserved for those who show up consistently, respectfully, fully. They have to earn it. And when you stand in that truth, my friends, that's when you become magnetic, because peace is rare. And rare things, they don't chase, they don't beg, they exist with power. So, as we bring this journey to a close, remember this: they don't miss the one who stays available. They miss the one who grows, who lets go, who reclaims their peace. Your silence, your stillness, your growth. That's what speaks the loudest. Let it echo. Let it remind them that access to you is earned. If this message resonated, drop a comment below with "I reclaimed my power." Show the world where you stand. And if you found value here, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs the reminder. Stay grounded, stay powerful.